Turns out that heaven is a place where Roman Reigns was my tribal chief.
Oopsie, the worst rapper alive. Oops. Yeah. Big Mac's back on the mic like oops. Back on the horse, still jumping through hoops. The missing link in pink, I don't lip sync. Just to be clear, choking isn't my kink, but I do it anyway sometimes, I guess. Gotta laugh now, die later in my times of stress. I'm blessed, feeling good, charged up like a Hadouken.
Mota di Tabanakis. See, welcome into the worst wrestling podcast. I am your host with the least, Jack Lucenay. Please smash that like and subscribe if you want to help support the channel, because that is the only way. We don't do any of that other stuff like those other channels, because we are just a couple of Muppets over here. Me and Squirrel Steve back here. So just drop an elbow on that like and subscribe. But otherwise, let's get right into things. My eyes are more bloodshot than Paul Heyman's right now. But we are starting backwards, forwards. We're going to start actually with Smackdown in Madison Square Garden. And before really I get into what happened, in the bulk of the show concerning the Bloodline, really the only note I wanted to touch on was the triple threat match between LA Knight, Santos Escobar, and Logan Paul. I thought this was a great match. As much as I hate to admit it, I gotta say I'm a huge Logan Paul fan as far as his wrestling persona and what he's able to do in the ring. I never was like a huge fan of his podcast. Like I didn't really listen to it or anything. My introduction really to Logan Paul was when he really started involving himself with the WWE and becoming more of like a full-time wrestler. And I have to admit, I was definitely skeptical at first, but then seeing him, the way he performed, obviously, in his first set of matches was already incredible. But the way that he's continued to evolve, not just in the ring, but also just on the mic. Like even something as simple as now that I am doing the podcast, and every time I try to point down at my name, the way that he just did the little drawing on the Elimination Chamber cell so that the camera could read and see it. Like it's all the little things that really make Logan Paul a fantastic wrestling heel and talent. So I have to admit, he's actually one of my favorites on SmackDown right now, and I do want to see LA Knight get a run with the US Championship. And based on this triple threat match, I think that is coming. I think they are sowing those seeds because yes, there was some outside involvement. There was all the hilarious stuff with Tyrese Halliburton and Jalen Brunson, who just had a playoff matchup, and they're in the Garden. So obviously they're all rooting for Jalen Brunson. I thought that was a great spot. But, because of the run-ins, ultimately LA Knight is able to reverse a roll-up pin and get the pin himself. He wins the match. That puts him heading into Money in the Bank. But it's also the fact that he got the pin on Logan Paul. So now he has a pinfall victory over Logan Paul that he can hold over him. That gives him a path to the U.S. Championship. I think they're obviously pushing that match to SummerSlam. And I would imagine that Logan Paul is going to give up that U.S. Championship at SummerSlam. I know he's had it for a while now and he's done the promo. I think at this point that is starting to wear thin a little bit, and they want to bring the championship back to the main television product. And I think the way you do that is by putting it on LA Knight, who clearly is very deserving of a singles title run and has been waiting for it for some time. And I don't think anyone, outside of like diehard LA Knight fans really considered him a true threat to the world title, especially when it was on Roman. It was a nice feud and everything, and it really helped his stock, I think. But this is the path now, is you have to put this strap on him, I feel like, at this point. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do an angle where Logan Paul ultimately is the reason LA Knight does not win at Money in the Bank. And so that's kind of now the lead into, not only did, have they been feuding, obviously, like LA Knight showed up at his house and everything, but you have the fact that LA Knight's got the pinfall victory, and then you add in Logan Paul with costing him Money in the Bank. Now you've really set up that feud for the U.S. Championship at SummerSlam. I think the right decision would be to flip it to LA Knight at that point. And before we get into the main Bloodline stuff, the only other note that I was going to make about the show is Baron Corbin as a fucking fit babyface. Like, this guy has just go away heat with me. I like Baron Corbin as a talent, but he's one of these characters that I just absolutely will never buy as a babyface. Like, this white meat babyface role where he's chopping it up with Apollo Creed, like, they just sound petty. They're fucking backing catering. You're not even on the show. You don't have an opportunity at Money in the Bank. And even they bring up the fact that Baron Corbin, famously couldn't capitalize on his Money in the Bank cash in, which maybe at some point I'll do a top 10 worst Money in the Bank holders. He would be like number 2, only behind like Austin Theory, who couldn't cash in on the U.S. champ. But yes, let's get into the main event of the show, of SmackDown, the Thorough line. The Bloodline story is finally heating up. And I haven't been very in on this B-rated Wish version of the Bloodline with Solo Sikoa. And even, the debut of Jacob Fatu, I thought it was nice, but I also questioned, are we already getting into that realm of, are we going to maybe oversaturate the Bloodline with too many characters too quickly? But we got one hell of a fucking story beat here in Madison Square Garden, thanks to the wise man, the Hall of Famer, the ECW legend, Paul Heyman. And you know what? What I love about Paul Heyman, excuse me, and you can talk about like the big table spot at the end. What I love about Paul Heyman is the devil is in the details with Paul Heyman. You look at over the last few weeks and basically since WrestleMania, since Roman Reigns has gone away and they've started this story with Solo Sikoa, Paul Heyman's appearance on a week-to-week basis has kind of slowly gotten worse and worse. It's like, I don't know, this is a old-ass reference, but shout out to us 90s kids. If y'all grew up with the game Nightmare, it was like an old-ass board game that came with a VHS tape. And you had the Crypt Keeper who progressively got like older and uglier as the tape wore on. Paul Heyman's been getting uglier as this Bloodline Solo Sikoa takeover has been going on. And, again, even on this night, like of all nights, he's got like the stubble. He clearly hasn't shaved. He's got the bloodshot eyes. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. Like, he's really putting it on, and I love it. This is why I love Paul Heyman, is, again, just all like the little details. And they have the whole thing, early in the night where the Bloodline is coming out and they get attacked by Randy Orton, Kevin Owens, and Cody Rhodes. And there's the really cool spot where Kevin Owens does the swanton to one of the Tongas, off of like the red. That's the one little caveat I would have liked if either because I remember it's the Tonga. I get confused with the Tonga names. I'm sorry. It's the Not Tama. Not Tama is the one that took the bump through the table. I feel like he should have been either selling it more or just like not there later that night because of the bump he took from KO. Because it was straight up like a swanton through the table on the outside, like in the crowd. So that maybe that's just like a pet peeve of mine, but then you had like the security come out and the whole security force gets demoed, and then Nick Aldis goes back and comes back with like fake looking security guard / cops, which is like the upgraded security. And it's funny because I did see people say online, like, well, why would security come out to stop the baby faces from beating up the heels, but they didn't stop the old man from getting killed at the end of the night. And the only thing I could come up with is like, well, I mean, half the security force got beat up by Cody Rhodes, and then so like maybe the cops like left, and it was like just the security force that's all like banged up left, and so like I don't know. I agree. There's certain story beats sometimes, and it's wrestling. I think that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in, where it's like, all right, look, it is professional wrestling. Not every little detail is going to be so thought out like a fucking Scorsese film. So, you know, the fact that they've done immeasurably better, and especially like with when you talk about like the production and the camera angles and like everything that they've done so much better since Lee Fitting took over the main production, and obviously Triple H taking over creative, like when they make little small mistakes like this, like I'm willing to give them the leeway of, okay, fine, I'll just delete that from my brain and just kind of go with the flow, right? So we get to the end of the night, and at this point, like Kevin Owens and Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes have been kicked out of the building, so they're not there either. And we get to it's like another tribal ceremony where they're gonna induct. This is where it was confusing, I guess, because earlier in the night also, Solo backstage tells Paul Heyman straight up, like, hey, you're my wise man, and it wouldn't make sense if I didn't listen to your advice. So Jacob Fatu is not here. But we're going to go out and have like an acknowledgement ceremony, but you're the one that's going to acknowledge me. It's like, I thought technically Paul was already doing that, maybe unwillingly, but he had already essentially acknowledged Solo kind of by force. So I don't know, you know, Paul being so smart, even in kayfabe, like why would he just buy the, okay, yeah, Jacob Fatu is not here. Maybe he just had the suspicion anyways, because it didn't seem like he was that surprised by it when then Solo announced Jacob Fatu to come out. And, you know, note on Jacob Fatu's entrance, that was badass. I loved his entrance. And especially because it feels like they've been doing all the Def Rebel music. I don't know if it was still Def Rebel that did the theme song, but the fire and the drums for Jacob Fatu's entrance and like red and black as a color scheme, I just think is awesome anyways. So kind of like the way they do like the low lights with the fire and the wolf symbol, all the symbolism, the symbology. No, it's symbolism. The word you're looking for is symbolism. But yeah, the symbolism of like all the wolf stuff for the Samoan werewolf, yeah, on point, very on point. And so he comes out, and Solo basically announces him as his enforcer, and he has both of the Tongas and Jacob Fatu acknowledge him as tribal chief. And then he looks to Paul and he says, all right, Paul, it's your turn to acknowledge me as tribal chief. Paul seems hesitant, but to make matters worse, you have not Tama pulls out from the bag the Jesus Christ, I wrote the name of it, the Ulafala, the red like Samoan necklace that symbolizes the tribal chief. And Paul immediately, again, I love Paul Heyman so much. He's like, where'd you get that? He's like literally in tears now because he sees the Ulafala, which honestly, he treats the Ulafala even more prestigiously than the actual WWE title. And again, that's a credit to Paul Heyman and the devil in the details and his acting and just why he. But Solo basically like hands him the Ulafala, and Heyman is just like clutching this thing, and there's this moment where Paul is like holding the Ulafala, tears in his eyes, and he looks up and he mouths, "Why have thou forsaken me?" That shit made me laugh. But then you know, the big pop from the crowd was when it's almost like the Shawn Michaels Ric Flair, like, I love you, I'm sorry. He's like, Solo, I love you. I acknowledge that you are not my tribal chief. And then Solo just immediately fucking spikes the shit out of him. And then Jacob Fatu hits the diving headbutt. And they pull up. And Penguin, sorry. Paul Heyman literally has like the same build as like Danny DeVito playing the Penguin in Batman Returns. So like the way that they like pull him out of the ring, it's awkward, but awkward in a sense where like it's real. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's almost like the fact that like he can't sell makes it look even more like he's sell. You know what I'm saying? Like it just looks like they're yanking this old man out of the ring, and that's exactly what happens. They yank his old ass out of the ring, and they put him up for the Shield Bomb, which is the triple power bomb, and they drop his ass through the announce table. And man, the return when, and then just to cap off the night before I go into the rest, Solo with the one of the Tongas puts the Ulafala on him, and they all stand tall, acknowledging Solo as this new version of the Bloodline, which is again Solo, the Tongas, and Jacob Fatu. And you have to assume that this is like gonna lead to, I would hope, Survivor Series, because you would get War Games, Bloodline Civil War Edition. But yeah, the return when Roman Reigns comes back, and you have Roman Reigns and the Usos come back. I'm curious to see who that fourth member is going to be. And I've said before that what I want to see is I want to see The Rock be that fourth member, because the idea that you would have Roman Reigns, The Rock, and the Usos versus this new version of the Bloodline, like the Rock and Roman version seems unbeatable, right? You would assume they would win that match, but that's where you have The Rock turn on Roman Reigns. And it turns out that The Rock has actually been orchestrating this whole thing as the final boss, as revenge for Roman Reigns losing to Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania and making him look like a fool. And so he decided to back Solo Sikoa instead. And you really have Roman Reigns positioned as like the ultimate babyface, because you got to have like the odds to overcome. And Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu and the Tongas, as much as they are great and they look great together right now, and this is the most that I've bought into this storyline since post WrestleMania, you would have to assume that Roman Reigns and the Usos would be able to take care of this group primarily on their own, even. You know what I'm like? Roman by himself almost should be able to take on like Solo and the Tongas. So like, Jacob Fatu and Solo kind of make it a little bit more deadly, but I really think the way that you do it is you have Roman Reigns and The Rock and the Usos taking on the new Bloodline at Survivor Games, in the War Games, and then you have The Rock turn on Roman in the match, cost them the match, and then that's how you have The Rock back. And then you can even turn that into The Rock versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania if you want. You could do it at Royal Rumble. That's where now all your possibilities apply, and you don't even need the world title for any of this, which is great. Like, you have this amazing storyline, and frankly, you don't even need the world title for it. Like, I think what they're doing with the Bloodline, and I said before that I was going to be patient because, yes, I was not happy, or and when I say happy, I mean like I knew they were spinning their wheels a little bit with the story, and I knew that this was eventually going to lead to something like this. I didn't see it being that they were going to kill Paul Heyman. I think that's a great spot. I think that's something now that people can latch onto and remember, and right away gives heat when Roman comes back of, you killed my wise man, you tried to take my bloodline and take my spot. So obviously like this feud with Roman and Solo is set up, but again, it just seems to me like even with all that, Solo Sikoa just feels outmatched by himself against Roman Reigns. And I think the way that you really balance that out is, like I'm saying, you do the whole thing with The Rock. So we'll get into a little bit of Monday Night Raw, and we'll cut this one short tonight. Because actually, you know, the whole reason I'm, you may have noticed, like, oh, why isn't Jack, like, smoking mad toast on this episode? Actually, my daughter's here tonight, so I smoked out on the balcony before the show, so we're still good to go, still 420 friendly, but just, you know, got to be a little bit more responsible. But anyways, Monday Night Raw, this whole angle with Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio is absolutely killing me, and I'm loving every minute of it. This is the kind of salacious angle that we would get like back in the Monday Night, like the Attitude Era, but without kind of like the gross factor of like Vince McMahon hovering over it, you know, making Trish, you know, walk on all fours and bark like a dog, like, you know what I'm saying, without like the demeaning gross factor. Like this is the kind of like intriguing, and I get that I totally get it's not for everyone, but I think the whole point is WWE is for everyone, and so this is a type of angle that like many people are going to be into, and the way that you do like a romance angle, I think they're setting this up brilliantly, and the way that they've set up, like, you know, to contrast on SmackDown, the way that they've set up the pop for Roman Reigns when he comes back, they are doing the exact same thing on Monday Night Raw for Rhea Ripley. When Rhea Ripley comes back, believe it, that pop is going to be crazy. And I don't know if they're going to fast track Damian Priest getting kicked out of the Judgment Day, because it feels like that's an obstacle to Liv Morgan taking over. I'm curious if they're going to try to align those two characters or have Damian Priest get kicked out and then have it be so that he is an ally for Rhea Ripley when she returns. So it's very curious to see kind of how they take that story, which is going to be basically, we're going to see how that plays out next week at Money in the Bank for the Damian Priest Seth Rollins match. And I see it going one of two ways. And we just saw it on Monday Night Raw, the way that Liv Morgan was able to manipulate the R-Truth into giving the title shot and then get the win for the Judgment Day. Obviously getting the rest of the Judgment Day on her side at this point. And, you know, like Carlito's already 100% in. He's hilarious. Carlito is popping me every time he's on screen. Just the setup earlier in the night, Damian Priest walks in and they're all playing on a new PlayStation 5. And it's funny because they're playing as Rhea Ripley, which is just extra funny. But then like they're eating a huge plate of chicken nuggets and it's like, oh, these are all gifts from Liv Morgan. And then Dom shows them the spicy text photos, and you get all of them just like, and Carlito's reaction is absolutely the best, where he's like, that's cool. And then Damian Priest right away is like, Carlito. So I love the dynamic that Carlito represents right now in the Judgment Day. I think it's hysterical. But ultimately Damian Priest, and you know, Damian Priest foreshadowing it also, even in his promo against Seth Rollins later in the night when he said, you know, I'm the world champion. Judgment Day needs me a lot more than I need them. So there's all these foreshadowing of setting up I think, just getting back to it, at Money in the Bank, it's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be that Liv Morgan comes out and she costs Seth Rollins the match and Damian Priest is able to retain. And he might be upset about it at first, but ultimately, you know, I think it leans to, again, Liv Morgan is an aid to the group. And so he starts to accept her invasiveness and her trying to take over, and ultimately accepts her in the Judgment Day. But always kind of has that, you know, he's like the kind of Sami Zayn character in the Bloodline of like, he's the one that could turn, right? So that you have, when Rhea Ripley comes back, maybe that's the way that she tries to drive a wedge into the Judgment Day, is by talking to Damian Priest. So that's one version. The other version is you just have Liv Morgan straight up come out and get him kicked. Like, you have Liv Morgan come out. I don't know if it would be better, though, to have Liv Morgan come out and basically cost him the match, or if you have Finn Balor do it, or a combination of both. Maybe Liv Morgan comes out, Dom comes out, and then Finn Balor comes out to try and control both, and then somehow Finn Balor ends up costing, because there's this also this kind of side stuff of like, again, on Monday Night Raw, there's this other story beat where Liv Morgan comes out of the Judgment Day's locker room as Damian Priest is going in, and you know, Finn Balor's in there by himself, and that's where he says, hey, she came just to tell me that she got us the tag team title opportunity. But obviously maybe there's more going on behind the scenes there. Maybe Finn is the one manipulating things. Do we get a version of the Judgment Day where Finn Balor is now the leader, with kind of Liv Morgan and Dom Mysterio coupled at his side? Obviously, JD is loyal to Finn, so that's not in question. And then you have Carlito kind of as backup. And then that becomes the feud for Damian Priest, while Seth Rollins is fighting Gunther at SummerSlam. So I'm very curious to see which way that they're going to go with the Liv Morgan storyline coming out of Money in the Bank. And I'm curious to see if Damian Priest is going to retain that title, because you would think that Damian Priest versus Gunther at SummerSlam for the world title doesn't make a ton of sense, right? Like, that's two basically big boy heels, and that's supposed to be like a main event slot at SummerSlam. So maybe that's kind of the thinking, is they're going to have, you know, this is the part where you have something happen where Damian Priest loses that title and his spot in the Judgment Day. If you have both of those things happen, you advance that story. You also weaken the Judgment Day, where the de facto leader can't be a part of the group anymore. And so now Liv Morgan is able to kind of maybe weasel in and really take over the group. And maybe she replaces Damian Priest. I actually think it would be really cool if they brought in Braun Strowman. They've had this whole ongoing thing where Braun Strowman has been a huge problem for the Judgment Day, but he's kind of shown a soft spot for Liv Morgan. Maybe, you know, it's because of, you could say it's resemblances to Alexa Bliss, but that's a story that you could tell, is like, if Liv Morgan is able to tame the monster among men and make him part of the Judgment Day, now you have, you know, if you think of it again as like, okay, now you have Liv Morgan as the figurehead with Dominic Mysterio, you have Finn Balor and JD McDonough, and then you have your enforcer in Braun Strowman, and then you even can still have Carlito kicking around or whatever for comedic relief. Like, you know, now you're cooking with gas a little bit. So again, very interested to see what dynamics they play off of and which ways they decide to take the Liv Morgan storyline. And the last one before we sign off here, I'm not going to talk too long about it, because honestly, I'm like already getting emotional. I think it's emotional for a lot of fans, the references to Bray Wyatt in terms of the Wyatt Sicks storyline and specifically the Bo Dallas and Uncle Howdy promo, and I saw both facets of it. So I saw the promo online first, and I saw it just like the promo by itself, and I was like, okay, that's I really, first of all, I really enjoyed it in a cathartic and meaningful way, but also in an entertaining way. And that was one aspect of seeing it. And then I wanted to see in the context of the entire show. And oh my God, you guys, at the 11th hour, coming in from the top rope,
Let's go.
Yo, SC, my guy. Thank you for making it in.
Yeah, man.
I was literally about to leave these people.
Yeah, so I came in just in time. Hey, it's like you were getting beat, you know, like the Bloodline was, but then you have Jacob Fatu come out and just dominate, you know. So here to just talk a little bit, man. I'm glad I caught you at the end. Didn't mean to, ruin the show or anything, but I always love your intros.
No, absolutely glad to have you. We'll double back on the Bloodline stuff because I talked about it earlier, but actually it's great that you're here because I was just about to talk about the Bo Dallas Uncle Howdy segment, the promo. So basically I was just saying that I had watched it separately and that in a cathartic and meaningful way, like it meant a lot to me as a fan, and then it was also like very entertaining. But I watched it kind of as a standalone online, and then I wanted to see it in the context of the full show, the way that they delivered the tape and everything. And, I recently lost one of my best friends, and I think everybody deals with grief in different ways. And if it had been anyone else but Bo Dallas and this current iteration of the production and creative team, I could understand more. I definitely saw some complaints online that people mentioned about like, they're just using Bray Wyatt's death, for ratings or whatever, however way you want to portray that. And I disagree in this specific case because I think, one, it's the elephant in the room. I think you obviously needed to address it.
For sure.
The fact that you took Bo Dallas to do it, and I love the way that they did it. And again, I feel like Bo is the only one that could sit down and do that promo in that way.
For sure.
And again, I understand when they were like, I think the line that kind of cut through and maybe affected people a certain way was, how did you feel when your brother died? And I think you could see that as being uncouth, especially because, it's WWE and given the past and everything, right? But again, I look at it as like, I think Bray Wyatt would be like looking down and, he would be so proud of his brother. And this is the exact I feel like he would do himself. For sure. If it had been like a reversed role situation. So, me as a fan, I was not only okay with it, but I really enjoyed what they did. What were your thoughts on the Bray Wyatt, on the Bo Dallas Uncle Howdy promo?
Yeah. So first and foremost, man, RIP Bray Wyatt. Guy was beautiful in the way he not only had his stories, but the way he articulated his words are just so impactful. He knows how to do, and we're seeing Bo evolve into that, which is great. So for me, man, it was very. I don't think they would have done this without Bo's blessing. Like, unless Bo said this is a great idea, and especially when they asked him, how did you feel when your brother was gone, or however the question was framed, his face, his energy that came out of, on camera, his voice, everything was so impactful. It was like I felt like everything was just taken from me, and like in those moments, it was like, oh shit, this guy, like, he's about to raise hell. Like the way it's just that passion is like, the world's no longer here for me. It's just everything was taken from me. I have nothing else to be here for. And then, going deeper into it, them just talking back and forth. And then you find out it's the Firefly Funhouse. It kind of shows what Bray Wyatt was dealing with, right? When he had the demon too, like just his inner demons. And that's what Uncle Howdy is to him, and we don't really know the full backstory on even what Uncle Howdy is, right? Like we're just now touching that, and he even goes into, we were supposed to take over, and we were on the verge, and now you understand that him coming in as Uncle Howdy was supposed to be a brotherly, end up being like a brotherly tag team, and possibly giving them the belts at one point down the road, which is something like it seems you dream of. I mean, the Usos talk about all the time, like, bro, we dreamed of being tag team champions, outside of wrestling each other at WrestleMania. Like this is the goal as a brother. And so you realize that layer of the story to think like, man, it would have been just very deep with it. But now things happen, and now Uncle Howdy, has to transition into a different type of being. It's no longer a tag partner. Now he's a leader. Now he's the leader of the Wyatt Sicks. And their intro in itself was A1, magnificent. Like just the way they came out, you heard the Firefly music, you see the Fireflies out, and it goes through, and you just see, holy hell, they are not leaving anything alive in their pathway. Like if you're in front of them, watch out, right? And then the way they all presented themselves. I absolutely love it, because when Bo Dallas first came on the scene, it was like, who is this guy, right? Like, and some wrestlers are like that. You're like, man, you're wasting this character. Comes back as Uncle Howdy, you're like, okay, this is very interesting. But I'm happy that they are bringing in Bo Dallas, or maybe he's going as Taylor Rotunda, whatever his name may be outside of Uncle Howdy. But they're bringing him in, and now it's like, okay, this is the evolution, and this is where WWE excels. Just the way they build in stories or bring in other stories. We're seeing it with the Wyatt Sicks. We're seeing it with Liv Morgan in the Judgment Day. We're seeing it with the Bloodline and everything. Like their stories are so intricate that it's hard to just like come in and be like a fan right now, because you need to know the past to know why this is important at this point in time. You know what I mean? And I'm super excited with the way they go to. I hope they don't mess this up, because I think it's basically passing on the torch in a sense, and it's a lot to have under you, because you're not the Wyatt family, but the Wyatt Sicks, and I think that's where people, including Rotunda and everyone in the Wyatt Sicks, like you're not repeating what the Wyatt family does, but you're continuing that pathway, whatever that may be. You confronting your inner demons, just having chaos all the way through everything that's in front of you, but you're continuing that story. And that's what makes it so much better, because it's like, all right, look at when the Wyatt Sicks first came out, and this is the evolution of what that is now.
Yeah, this is the first time in a while that I felt like Monday Night Raws aren't dragging, because they're absolutely cooking with these main two storylines that are, it's not just that they are having these storylines, it's that these are storylines that are thorough lines for the entire night. So it's not like coming out wham bam thank you ma'am in one segment. It's like, no, these are storylines that are like, we've got 3 to 5 segments planned for this entire evening.
Yeah.
But the real reason I wanted to get you on the show today was to talk about the Bloodline stuff, especially on the heels of Smackdown last night, and the fall of the Roman Empire. It's official. Solo Sikoa has taken over, and he's the new tribal chief. I think it's confusing, because to me he had already kind of anointed himself. Yeah. But now it's like, so now he went and he got the Ulafala, and shit has gotten real. They put Paul Heyman's old ass through a table. Yeah. So break it down a little for your thoughts on the Bloodline. New Bloodline.
Yeah, for sure. So again, going back to the backstory, I did a tweet earlier talking about when he just came in and done it, and that's like, man, again, a story that you can love or hate Solo, but the way he's evolved, when Zilla's coming out, Zilla's the enforcer, so he's doing his screaming, his Umaga stuff. That's Solo when he first came out. Now he's a leader, and now he's talking, and now he's saying, acknowledge me. Like, you have to get behind this to be like, okay, this guy wants to be the boss. You don't have to acknowledge him, but you now realize, like, oh shit, like he's here to take over, right? Very interesting. I saw Elite Rockers, I think is the tweet name, talk about just how dedicated Paul Heyman is, where it looks like he didn't sleep, has the bag under his eyes, he didn't shave, he didn't do anything, so it looks like he's stressed mentally and just physically. And for him to go out there and say that, and a lot of people tweeted too, like the pop when he says, I don't acknowledge you. But that also, it's not just not acknowledging Solo, it's also saying, no, there's only one tribal chief.
Yeah.
So at some point Roman's coming back, but it also gets tangled up because Paul Heyman, I think it was the week before last week, he told CM Punk, take me with you. So is it like
Yeah,
is he also
that
leading into
actually
that?
made me laugh really a
Yeah.
lot.
But it's like, is he, because we know he can elevate players even more, right? Some wrestlers even more. So that could be his next person to mentor in a sense, right? But either way, the Bloodline, man, absolutely love the story. Shout out Zilla Fatu. He had a match in Houston last night. I don't know. I didn't see the results of it, but I know he had a match in Houston last night for GCW, I do believe. But it's phenomenal, man, because you know the Rock's coming back. He said he's gonna have more appearances. Roman's coming back, and Jimmy's been vacant. Jay's doing his own thing, but right before WrestleMania, Jay even said, "Bro, I don't care if I win or lose. We need to run the Usos back." So that's leading into that. Roman, coming back in, and then even Cody playing his part and saying, "I don't see a tribal chief. I don't see a champion. I see a seat filler." So it's like, Solo said, "Yo, I'm the tribal chief here," but then you still have two guys, an enemy, and then a coach, what do they call it, a manager, and Paul Heyman say, "Nah, man, like, we don't acknowledge you, because if we're gonna acknowledge anyone, we know who the tribal chief is, and that's Roman Reigns." And it's the moment you hear his pop, the dun, then the dun, na, 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 na. Once you hear that, crowd's gonna go crazy, man. And it's getting closer to Endgame, not Endgame, War Games. It's getting closer to that, where they have the two cages and they have it. Man, they can do some Bloodline stuff. So I'm excited, man. I've been into this story since with Roman. And, his whole thing was, I want to elevate my family. It's not just about me being the champion. And what's he doing? Jay is popping right now. Everyone loves Jay right now. Solo, he's at the top technically. People are talking about him, right? He's like, this is what I wanted for my family. And then he brought in the Tongas and the Fatu. Like, he is, because of Roman and the God mode that he played as the tribal chief, he elevated the whole Anoa'i family. RIP Sika as well, another legend that passed too. But he elevated that whole family, and you just go in there and see this legacy is way deeper than we thought. Like, people think Roman and the Usos was it. Nah, man, there's some guys still up and coming that aren't even it, but they're in the family that's like, oh, they're gonna follow the path. That's just what the boys do. And the girls too. Rock has some daughters that are doing it too. His daughter's like GM of NXT. So it's definitely great just to see it all. I love the way it's unfolding, and I cannot wait for more, because it doesn't matter if it's Jay coming out, Roman, The Rock, whoever comes out next to just make that pop is gonna make a huge pop, and it's just gonna make the world circulate. So I love it.
So here is my theory for what's going to happen, and I want to know how much you agree with this idea and how I laid it out earlier on the show. I think what happens is we get the Bloodline Civil War at War Games. I think the way that they're going to do it is they're not going to just bring in another Bloodline member right now, I think, because you're going to water it down eventually if you keep doing that too early. Right. What I think happens is you have this new version of the Bloodline now. You have Solo, his enforcer, Jacob Fatu, and the Tonga boys. Yeah. I think you have it. Roman comes back. You have the Usos come back. Who's that fourth guy? You have The Rock. Exactly. Yeah. So you have Roman and The Rock and the Usos versus this new Bloodline. In everyone's mind, though, I think Roman and The Rock are too powerful to overcome in that scenario. So how do you have it that the new Bloodline wins? The Rock turns on Roman in the War Games match. Yeah. Hit the ass with the rock bottom. This is your punishment and revenge for embarrassing the family and losing the title at WrestleMania. I'm backing the new Bloodline. I'm backing Solo Sikoa. Yeah. And that's how now you have Roman built as the ultimate babyface with an actual obstacle to overcome, because now you have this new Bloodline, but you have the final boss backing them. So now it's 5-on-3, right? You can bring in another Bloodline member at that point if you really want, but I think you have it built to now you get The Rock and Roman at WrestleMania. Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, technically speaking, you could do The Rock and Solo, but it's not, or The Rock and Solo. And Solo for head of the table, but you got to get to the Roman and The Rock. So maybe it's like, for whatever reason, Solo just gives it to The Rock, or you do it where Rock takes it. I don't know how you get there, but ultimately you do because he turned on War Games and back New Bloodline, the final boss versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. You don't need the title. Or even you could say like, Roman versus The Rock and Solo. Like he's got to take both of them, or however you do it. Like I said, it's got to be for the head of the table, right?
Yeah.
So my big thing though is they get the War Games match and The Rock turns on Roman. So what are your thoughts on if they decide to go that route, or do you have like a different theory of what they're gonna do?
Well, I'll go on to both. So yeah, that sounds like a brilliant way to do it, because you can also, WrestleMania is a double feature, and it's in Vegas this upcoming year, I do believe. So they want to go big. So you can definitely have Roman versus the final boss on night one as a main event too, because you can have it like, you have to get through me if you even want a spot at the head of the table, right? But then night two, you have Roman versus Solo for head of the table, but that's not the main event because you'll have Cody Rhodes fight maybe Randy Orton, or maybe LA Knight has a pop, but I don't see it having. Randy Orton looks like the top one. I mean, you know this when he's saying champions and stuff. Randy Orton's being his snake right now. He's being that viper just hunting right now. But that would be the main event. But you can have those both go out. But I also want to point out Tonga. When Zilla Fatu came out and they started putting up the one, the Tongas looked at each other for a second, and it wasn't like a millisecond. It wasn't good. Like you realize, like, they're just like, who is this Fatu guy? Because they've had beef in the past. So it's like, will they be the reasons why it turns on them? I like your idea, though, because I think that's a great way to put in Roman versus The Rock, which is the main event we originally thought we were getting, right? But it doesn't put pressure on the championship, which I believe you said also. You don't have to have them be it, but they can still be a main event 9-1 because people just want to see The Rock, right? Like you're leading up to that, and then night two, again, that bloodline with Solo there. If that does turn 3-on-5, you don't need to bring out Zilla Fatu, because one, I don't think he goes against Jacob or anything. You don't need to bring him out. I think he's still polishing up to become a good wrestler. And as intricate it goes, you can have him come out next year later. But then you can also bring up Cody Rhodes and the honorary Uce Sami Zayn come to their aid.
That's literally what I just did a little reaction, because it was like the honorary Uce.
Yeah,
they get Sami Zayn back.
Yeah,
that would be, oh my god, that would actually be amazing to bring back honorary Uce segments with Sami Zayn and the Uso brothers and Roman Reigns, just watching them try not to crack while Sammy's like trying to pop them. Like, oh man, I miss that shit.
And then right now too, it's difficult for them to say Roman's a baby face, right? Like it's like he left as a heel, right? So now how do you actually turn him? Well, Cody Rhodes, the ultimate baby face, also backs him up like, hey, I'm here for you. So now it's like, oh shit, okay, he's the good guy now, So
no, I love it. I love that idea too, man. I'm so excited for where they're gonna go with this. But we're gonna wrap it up here. Man, next time I have you, it hopefully won't be to crash just the end segment. Next time we'll get you for a full show. But man, still, thank you so much for coming in, even for the main event of the show. You're like Brock Lesnar. You skipped the whole pay-per-view and just came in for the good shit at the end.
I just got home and saw you were on, and I was like, oh yeah, let's get on and talk to him. So I appreciate you having me on. No, for sure. Tell the people though where we can find you. Yeah, man. So when I'm talking wrestling, it's SC, the H-Town Lucha. But you can find me at the PPR show on X. Do most of my stuff for Fantasy Football Universe, talking Devi, college football, but also talking AEW Forbidden Doors tomorrow. Excited for that. WWE, we got, Money in the Bank next week. And then New Japan, I'm into that. Try to follow all wrestling because it's beautiful all the way around if you just understand it's live theater. And that's what I love about it. Yeah, no, that's literally what I've called it since I was a kid, is athletic theater. So I'm with you on that. Man, SC, thank you so much for crashing the end of the show with me. Sure, bro. And like always, I will catch all of you guys on the flip side.
My positive contact results in affirmative impact. Never polarized on raps. I'm never primitive, but cannibalistic, vicious. Characteristics, hereditary potency. Episodic genes, yo. Able to eat MCs at extraordinary speed. Some of me is like slipping and razor blades and grease in your bare feet. I see your fucking colleagues misprise you very much to your dismay. So today, I can say you won't be running away. Hold your tail between your legs. I'm gonna advocate when you feel with full stakes. I'll take a hacksaw to you cockeyed, mumble rap, slack jaws. Leave you shredded on the side like some coleslaw. Then double time with the
sharp. I'm toxic like septic shock.